Okay, the time is now 12 o'clock noon, and we will call to order the special board meeting of the Board of Trustees for Tuesday, May the 10th. The first item on the agenda is public comment. We do not have anybody signed up for public comment. So we'll move into agenda item 2, discussion possible action items. Item A, we are going to table and move to May 16th. We're not quite ready with the finish with the process yet, and so we will have that on the agenda for next Monday. Item B is contracts over 100,000. Mr. Dodds.
These are some of the things that we were working through the year-end budget, things we felt like we could do and need to do, the playgrounds, et cetera, for playground equipment at Henderson and Bunch. Hellish Construction, this will be on the board workshop also, but for the batting cages over at Legacy. March Plumbing for hand washing station. Train for one of our chillers was damaged during the freeze, and so this will pay not only for rental but also for when the chiller gets here. And then also replacement. Since we've already got a deal on here for Train, we need to go ahead. I know this item is only $15,000, but we need to go ahead and include it. This is for a condensing unit over at Santa Rita. And then Livewire Midland, this is to run all of our electrical in 36 campuses for the E-rate funded UPS boxes.
The board may have a motion.
So moved.
Second. Motion by Mr. Siskevy, a second by Mr. Bishop. Any discussion?
I have a question for Ms. Spencer, Dr. Ramsey. And it's not pertaining to this specifically, but the playgrounds, et cetera, reminded me, what's the status of the new playground at Washington? Is it gonna replace one at a different campus that needs an upgrade, or?
Excellent question. Yes, it is going to be relocated, but I cannot remember off the top of my head.
Is it go to General Brink?
That might be where it's going.
That's what I would not have to say.
That might, but I can verify that and.
You just send, email us.
I'll put it in the Friday community.
Thank you. That's it, Chairman.
Any other discussion? All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous, 6-0. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the budget workshop, and we will look to Carla. Thank you, Carla.
Good afternoon, Mr. Murray, Board, Mr. Ramsey. Today is our second budget workshop. We previously had our first one back in April, and this is part of the process in getting the budget passed for next school year. So today we'll go over the plan calendar, just where we are. We'll give you a quick budget update on where 21-22 is closing. We'll hear an update from Mr. Bailey regarding human capital, and then moving on to as of right now, the 22-23 budget planning and those projections. So as I mentioned, we had our first workshop back on April 4th. This is the second one of 3. The last one will be on June 7th, and that will be where we will present the final budget that will be published in the newspaper and will be taken for your approval on the June 27 regularly scheduled board meeting. Now, we do have some board actions involved with the budget.
I'm sorry, the
Yes.
27th is the last month that we move it because of budget, right? That's not the third Monday.
Yes, that is
Correct.
correct. We do have a compensation manual, compensation plan originally going to the board on the May 16th meeting. I believe that will be going in the June 7th budget workshop now. But in the June 27th meeting as well would be, the final budget amendment for this year, the approval of the original budget for next year, and some other items regarding Chapter 49, and then the tax rate we will have in September of 2022. So we did receive our certified estimates at the end of April, and that is mainly going to be what the update in this budget workshop will be. The budget has been updated to reflect those estimates that we received from FED. So as of right now, from left to right, you'll have the first column is our original budget that we approved in June of last year. The revised budget is what was approved in the April board meeting that was discussed in the April board workshop. And then we just have what we are forecasting for the year end to be. There are some changes in other local revenue and federal revenue. So the biggest increase for federal revenue is because of the ESSER grants, we are able to add additional indirect costs on those federal grant programs. And then we received some local revenue we don't normally budget for because we don't want to rely on them, but those have been coming in, so we will be amending that budget at the end of the year. For expenditures, these are updated numbers on where it looks like we're going to end. As you can see, the biggest difference is in your salary and benefits, which we discussed is mostly on vacancies and just some, really mostly vacancies. And then what I do want to discuss, so as of right now, we are looking at just your revenue less expenditures and $18 million excess at the end of the year. Throughout the year, we've done some transfers in and out of general fund into our local capital projects funds. And I've highlighted them here on this row. Sorry, it's just points. If you all recall, the 3.6 million was from the last budget workshop. That was the buses and the turf tracks at Memorial and Legacy Stadium. And then the 2.2 million was for the LED lighting that we have done at all of the campuses. Now, the changes as of right now, it's looking like is the change of $2,065,000. That will be in another slide in here, and it included some of the items that you previously approved just now. And then 5 million for fund balance was to address a lot of the HVAC projects that we're working on. So after all of that, it still does look like we will still add another 5 million to fund balance at the end of the year. But as of right now, this is an estimate. Just want to remind you all, at the end of 2021, we had 178 million in fund balance. 105 of that is unassigned, which is within the 25% that we want to put in that unassignment. I guess you said that's not assigned. Alright. So this slide is what we presented in the previous budget workshop. The employee appreciation stipend, instructional materials, and items E, F, and G. Those are what make up the 3.6 million transferred to the local capital projects fund.
As long as this is encumbered before the end of the year, we're not worried about supply chain or buses or something, stuff not getting here before the next school year.
Right, so that was the purpose, the biggest reason behind the transfer is because it overlaps fiscal years. So we want to be able to make sure to encumber these and place those orders and get them started. Now, these are the additional items that make up the $2.2 million. Is some commitments for the Midland High turf field, employee child care and the portables, because we're converting some portables for child care. It requires some sprinkler system that needs to be installed, the hand washing stations that you've just now approved, BCT replacement and playgrounds. And then we also have some chillers and a replacement for the Midland High band truck that just happened. So we're adding that here.
So have all of these gone to the facilities committee?
Yes, this was recommended from the facilities committee, except for the last two. Is that correct, Kelly? Because those are two recent. The chiller went out at Legacy High, and then the truck for the rig.
And on A, the MHS truck, that's the truck we're talking about that runs on A, that it's just the general green space that they need. Okay.
Yes, so we will transfer it over to our local capital projects fund and assign it for that project or whatever.
And that represents half the cost.
That's what I was about to say. Did we confirm that we have the matching dollar amounts?
We do not have the matching at this time. There are funds.
Okay.
So that's why we'll move it over until the time when it's fully funded.
Okay.
So I'm handing over to Mr. Bailey for our human capital update.
Oh, yours is.
Yes, in the blue folder that after the.
We're gonna open an opportunity, I guess, we'll finish ask some questions.
If you
You
have
got
questions,
some
please
questions?
do.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, now, I guess the question I have, if we go back to that previous slide,
Yes.
I know the chief's not here, but maybe Dr. Ramsey or Mr. Dodds or even, Ms. Spencer can help us. And maybe I missed the vote on it, but how often do we replace our fleet for our police cars? I've noticed we've got some old fleet that our police officers ride around in with no air conditioning or anything like that.
We do have a fleet manager who keeps up with all of that information. I do not think the police department requested any new vehicles for replacement purposes. They did request additional vehicles if in fact officers are added as part of next year.
Okay, because we have added some more police officers, have we not?
Well, vehicles would have been provided then, but there's an additional request for another officer, another K-9 officer for next year. And if that is approved, then an additional vehicle will be purchased specifically.
And we did purchase 4 units or vehicles this year. It wasn't in this budget, it was actually out of the grant, right?
No.
No, it's out of this budget.
No, it's out of the grant.
It's out of the Midland, so you wouldn't see it in 199. So it's out of the Midland grant for our police department. And so I don't know if we received
We
those
have not
vehicles. We haven't
received
received those vehicles yet. Have
So
we?
it's
have
four.
not received
4, yes. 4
Explorers.
Explorers, yes.
All right, thank you.
Those vehicles go through regular maintenance just like any other vehicle?
They will actually be on the maintenance plan since we're buying them through the enterprise system. Since we have the grant, we're actually buying those for the most part. They will be part of the enterprise maintenance agreement, so they can pull in just about anywhere to get an oil change, those type of things. And so it's covered underneath the enterprise agreement.
You know when they're gonna be here?
I do not know when they're gonna be here. We asked, we've got quite a few vehicles on order, because that was one of the deals is
It's one of the supply chain.
it's a supply chain issue, but we have, switched to, enterprise to help either leasing or purchasing, which they have a better pool in vehicles, just because they buy so many each year. So we're hoping, I don't know, maybe 2 to 3 months, I don't know. We still
But
don't.
I guess my question is, so the maintenance is kept up with on those, I guess, for the sake for all of our vehicles, the maintenance, there's a record being kept
Absolutely.
on oil changes and
Yes.
repairs and stuff like that on all the vehicles.
Yes, sir.
And who's looking at that?
The fleet manager won because the fleet manager actually just finished, was it this last, I don't remember, just went through an analysis that he went through to look at who has a vehicle, where the vehicles are, what condition they're in. Are we expending more dollars on maintenance than the vehicle is worth? What should the cycle be? So the fleet manager is primarily responsible, but he reports to the transportation director.
Yes.
Do we have GPSs on all of our vehicles,
Yes,
All
we
of the
do.
white folks,
ma'am?
yes, all of the
All
white
of
folks, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Mr. Bailey, back to you.
All right, won't take very long. Good afternoon, board members again, President Murray and Lieutenant Ramsey. Very quickly, I provided a summary of the compensation plan. Of course, it's not much change this year, but you will receive that electronically. The printed document is something that you can follow along with, because in the first column, it basically identifies every change that will appear in the compensation plan. So sometimes when you're going through an electronic document, it's so you don't have to have 2 open, you can have this one in a hard copy format, and you can follow along once we send that out in electronic format. So you have the actual identifier, the job title in the next column, and then the rationale in the third column. I also provided you, these are TASB documents, a glossary of terms. So when you see what a reclassification is, it's identified there that it's basically a reassignment of a position that's already in the plan that's going to be converted or changed to another pay grade. Or maybe the job description has changed, so therefore the title has changed. So that's, those are things that are required as far as the reclassification is concerned.
Is there any sort of designation, whether that's a reclassification up or down? Is it almost always an up?
Sometimes, I mean, depends on the position. It could be a down change. It depends if, for instance, if you were going to split a job and maybe there's more requirements and, or more duties, and so it's gonna be 2 clerks instead of 1 secretary, that might be a change, or an analyst or something of that nature. So it could be one way or the other.
There's
But it's already-
it's all just reclassification.
Yes, it's already in the budget and already in position in the district.
So the reclassification is, when I see reclassification, it means like, for example, if, bus monitor reclassification, that's the reclassification?
So it's more than likely a pay grade change, moving from
Okay.
one pay grade to the other.
It's not,
And when you
it's not necessarily the actual title that I'm looking at here.
no,
It's just, there's something happening with that.
right. So for the reclassification, for a bus monitor, for instance, because of the 13.5 change, then that could make a difference in where that sits, and maybe moving from pay grade 1 to pay grade 2. And we can put a little bit more identifier in there.
No,
You'll
that's
see-
fine. No, that's fine. I just want to know that it's not just the title itself. There's multiple things that go in it.
Absolutely.
Potentially, that's a reclassification.
This is a nice crosswalk as you can review the current one and then the one you receive electronically. You'll be able to go by page number and see, so that you can look at what the changes
Because
were.
I was just trying to understand, like, when we get to this back page, the new positions of like speech pathologist and, family outreach liaison, how many people are we trying to hire in all of those positions?
So the comp plan doesn't speak directly to position numbers, it just
Okay.
speaks to the position
To
itself.
the way that they'll be paid.
Yes,
Got it.
yes.
So any questions or
and any
things like that,
changes?
shoot it to us so that we can provide it.
Yes, great question.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Because I'm assuming we're gonna need more than just one campus.
Yes, so that's just the, position, but there might be 12, there might be 2, so it doesn't speak to it.
Did any of these roll down from legislative stuff or PE, like these were mandates?
Yes.
Like,
Um,
I
so
look at the
H-
chief, I go, chief didn't, I mean, chief's chief, but I noticed he was in the reclassification.
So
Something
chief-
happened somewhere.
Right, so what happened with the chief is he was in the administrative professional pay grade with everyone else, but now we have a police department pay plan by itself. So that way, because police officers, when you're looking at market, which is, of course, is in the glossary of pay systems overview, it talks about market positions. So when you're grouping a lot of positions together in one pay grade, sometimes you'll get one that falls out. That's why we have bus drivers in a separate pay plan all by themselves, because the market may drive a CDL at, Ms. Spencer said today, like $25, $26, but we can change that one piece without changing everybody else. That causes a big uproar in the whole entire pay system, so.
And then to answer the question about, so HB 4545 continues to evolve a little, where if a student fails the course or their STAR test, we still have to provide for each administration of that STAR 30 hours of tutoring. So you'll see some campus tutors as a new position, literacy tutors, and even the reclassification of the summer school certified teachers. That'll all help us meet the requirements of HB 4545.
So if, for instance, there's a position that we'd like to see added or are curious about, but it's not listed here, then we just need to have a second conversation about what that looks like. Is that correct?
I would send an email, that way we can respond to the full board.
Yes.
And then we can either provide context or explain.
Great question as well. Every position in the district should be here in the compensation plan. That does not mean that it's all locally funded. So it doesn't matter where the funding comes from, it's still here.
Okay. But
If you
by
have something,
June,
yes.
if they're not in the compensation plan, then that position does not exist. Okay, that's what I
You need to have board members.
I will sponsor,
Yes. We will double the pay, the current pay that you're receiving, we will put you on a pay scale
Very,
to
very
double
paid.
that, yes.
Reckon we're blank.
double or nothing.
Yeah. We're that good.
It's nothing.
So those are some items for you as we release the full entire compensation plan that's like 40 pages. So wanted to make sure that you have that information. Not many changes this year other than the 58.5. That of course causes some compression issues that we'll have to address this upcoming year. I believe that this upcoming year, I'll talk to Dr. Ramsey as well, and so we can possibly get TASB to come in and do another salary study. It's been 5 years. And we moved from the last time this big document is $50,000 was where we were then, and so now we're at 58.5, and so it's time for them to come back in and look and see, making sure that all of our pay grades are appropriately assigned and everything. So it's an investment, but I think in 5 years it's probably
When would that occur?
it's a 3 or 4 month process.
It is.
So yes.
But it would not happen before we approve
No,
for this
no.
budget.
No,
It would be
no.
for next year.
It'll be for next year. So the other piece, unless there are any more questions about the compensation plan. The other item is in regard to health benefits, and we did receive information from our actuarial folks. They're estimating a 1.6% increase in benefits, which is great because, with inflation and everything else coming off of COVID, we did have our underwriters were looking at, they needed another month, another 30 days to actually see what that was going to look like for next year. And so we had a good month in that month. So that was great. Most of our employees, of course, they wait until the summertime to have major procedures, and treatments and that type of thing. So we try to get all of those in ahead of time, but they did come back. And so if you were to look at a 1.6% increase, that would be about $235,000 for the entire year. So it's negligible in terms of the main scheme of what we're looking at the budget.
And for clarity, you're talking about keeping a
$0.
zero cost
Yes.
for
For our employees.
So
As a
that's
choice.
absolutely still. One structural change that they will more than likely recommend is that we move from 4 plans or 4 options for our employees to 3, because the participation in that 4th option is not very much. So it definitely does help us if we move to 3. So that will probably be the
What time frame does it run from? Is it the fiscal year from June to?
August. So open enrollment starts in August. And we have the September 1 through August.
Okay,
So it coincides with the school year. Makes sense.
yeah, for the summer, whatever activities they have for the summer that can alleviate time off.
Any other questions? Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett.
Go ahead.
And this might be kind of looking in the future, but, there was 2 propositions that passed this past weekend. One of them has a reduction in ad valorem taxes, or the way it's calculated now, additional for homestead owners.
Yes.
How does that, I know it might be early, but do you got any insight into that?
And we have that calculation already built into our revenue, thinking that no way would that not pass. So, it does reduce, your M&O and INS. For M&O, it helps just a little bit because we're not collecting those tax dollars that would be resent and recaptured. For INS, it does lower how much you will be collecting, so sometimes it might bump up that tax rate in order to make up that difference in that amount. Because we have to set a tax rate in order to make the payments. That's just follow. So,
Right.
but that's, we knew that would pass, and that's great for
how does the, obviously, you know, if you reduce it somewhere, I mean, does it move, does it move it over to the state to have more control as to the funding?
No, well, it could as far as, you're reducing your local tax collections and the state would generally make up what that difference is. But, you know, right now, it'll show our property values, will have a bigger exemption because the exemption went from 25,000 to 40,000. So our exemptions will be more, so our less taxable value will be less. So, it just depends on how the formulas work out. I can't, you know, would say, yes, the state will be funding that. No, I can't, but, at least not for Midland ISD.
I know it's a big question in a sense, I mean, I know it's very dynamic, the budgeting process and the formulas, you know, that have come around or are in
For a
place.
property poor school district, it would adjust that state level of funding. So for us, it'll just mean we collect, and that's hard to say when our values are jumping straight up like they are right now, but as far as the homeowners, that amount will decrease some, and so.
First year, it's gonna look a little,
Yes. Yeah, there is that adjustment that first year.
but then after that, then it would be consistent, there would be a consistency in a sense,
Yes.
because of the economy or whatever, I mean, it's.
Property values are going to continue to adjust each year. I mean, it's growing up, you know, most of our property value increase was built off, our minerals this time. But if you look what's happening across the state, down in Williams County, they're expecting rooftops to go up 40%. You know, they're throughout the Metroplex and Austin area and all those types of deals. It's not oil and gas that's changing the property values. It's actually, you know,
Real estate.
homesteads and different things like that, the real estate, commercial and, homesteads. So,
When people flooding the state,
right.
we are picking up all the people who've left everywhere else.
I talked to one of my friends down there in Austin and their home value doubled.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So,
I don't want to beat this point, but I do want to ask a follow-up on Mr. Marquez's question. So in MISD, we already had an extra homestead exemption that we allow for MISD.
right,
And my understanding was we were still having to pay recapture on that amount.
correct.
And so how does that
The
affect
state
us?
doesn't recognize that. Now, it did for about 3 years, and now that has gone away. They recognize 50% of that additional homestead exemption. Now they won't. So it would be like we are collecting those taxes, which we are not because that is an exemption. But we're still having to pay recapture on that amount.
So will this increase change us based on us?
Say that
having
again, I didn't quite hear.
Will the change in the law that was approved, will that have any effect on what we had already? With the additional?
No.
Thank you.
We ready?
Thank you.
All right. So I've got a clicker. So as we, in our second budget, workshop, for 22-23, you can see we went ahead and went back to, 2019 when we had the large increase. 2021 property value increase and then a decrease this current year. And then this is our estimate that we received, April 30th, that our property values would be running from 34 billion to 43.7 billion. So that's right at a 27% increase, which most of that increase will be in minerals. There is some increase in real estate. This number here was the reason our Mormon transition grant went so high, that big increase there. So as we looked at the budget assumptions, Right now, our current tax rate, was the, compressed tax rate was at 91.34. We had the 4 golden pennies, and at 95.34 is our current M&O tax rate. Since our values increased so much, that's going to compress our tax rate down to the floor. So we will compress from 91.34 to 84.6, 80 cents, 1 4, however you want to say that. So it'll be almost 11-cent decrease in M&O tax rate. And we'll add the 4 pennies like we've always done, the golden pennies, to put our tax rate estimated right now at 84.6. And so that's part of House Bill 3 and you know, trying to lower the tax rate for our taxpayers. When our values jump up like that, it will compress. So now on the flip side, you know, what has always worried me is once you go down, there's no going up, you know, unless you approve a tax rate election. So, but that's where if we're collecting less taxes, let's say if values drop and we're collecting less taxes, how it will make up will be less recapture in there. So we'll be paying less recapture, which means that we will be able to keep more funds.
No benefit of using more of the golden pennies because we just lose it in recapture.
Right now, there is not, because it would be taking away what the state is paying us in form of transition grant and only adding to our taxpayers. So right now, the 5th golden penny that we could add to this
Without going to a vote.
without going to a vote would just, would change about $4 million.
Be a net wash.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the thing, you know, our values going up that high doesn't change our net revenue any at all. So the net stays the same because it's adjusted between former transition grant funds and how much we have to pay in recapture. So right now, we are basing our attendance rate for next year at 91.41. Right now, we're at 90% attendance rate. Our average is the T-part, that the adjustment that we received from TEA to adjust up to the 1920 first 6 weeks was at 94. That's how far we've dropped in our student attendance. So I can't jump out here and say we're going back to 94% for next year. I hope we do. We need to. Even at 94% across the state, that's not good. Most school districts are 96 and above.
I have a question. So all of our numbers, as far as our attendance, is based off of when each campus or what time they turn their attendance in to be accounted for. Is that a correct statement? So
Yes.
if Bunch or Baskin or whoever, if they don't turn their attendance numbers in the allotted time to turn it in, that can also hurt you from a standpoint of what your attendance rate is on a daily.
I mean, generally, attendance rate are set across the campuses to try to be fairly even. You know, so you have the elementaries collecting attendance rate. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Spencer, but generally you have that. Now, I think if they don't turn it in by a certain time, or, you know, they can turn it in, that's great. They don't turn it in that day, they have to turn it in within the week or whatever, so we can get those adjusted. So even when it may not be that day, but if they turn it in the next day or by the end of the week, it will recalculate what the attendance rate was supposed to be.
So it's a requirement for teachers to take attendance, and then it's
Yeah, but-
also a requirement for, as a teacher, to review your attendance to make any corrections necessary.
But if those numbers that they turn in is not accurate,
So if they're not accurate, at the 6-week level, there's a review as well
Yes.
of the attendance. And that review happens both at the campus and at the district service centers. And then at the semester for the high schools that receive credit, that's done as well. So right now, we're seeing what everyone across the state, and really everyone across the country is seeing. It's another one of those COVID issues that we're not getting our students back in 5 days a week.
Because I know one time, I think myself and Mr. Dodd somebody else was talking there. I mean, at one time it showed like we were missing 3,000 students daily. It just did, the numbers didn't add up there. I mean, to me, it just didn't add up that we were missing 3,000 students that wasn't going to school. So some of the numbers, to me, seem to be way off to say that we were missing 3,000 students a day.
I will tell you, being in classrooms, it's just one of the things that I don't know why I do, but I count. So I go into classrooms and I count students, and in just about every classroom I'm in, there are students missing. And so we do have, I don't know if that was past years, but this year, we do have a really low attendance rate. There are classes that has been another stressor on teachers, because they're trying to figure out, you two were missing today, you two were missing yesterday, and trying to get who was here when. We do have an issue with attendance. Do we think that there's places where we need to look at systems to make sure that it's as accurate as possible? Yes.
And I know the judge, I mean, I know we used to have truant officers where they were actually checking to see why we wasn't having kids at school. But
So there has been a request for additional support in that area to try to address truancy. But of course, this is a nationwide issue right now with attendance, but,
I will speak to the system deal, because Willa was out at the beginning of the year, and I think it's communication with the parents, even more so than it is with the administration knows how to handle an absence. But I did it wrong, and I'm a school board member, and I didn't know. She was out 3 days at the beginning of the year. I emailed her teacher, but I should have emailed her counselor or her principal, who handles the daily attendance. Well, then we got a threatening letter in the mail saying your child has not come to school, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh my gosh, she was sick. And I told somebody, unfortunately, I had those emails that I could go back to, and so they were able to change it. But if parents don't know how to report an attendance problem, then you have an attendance problem. Because I think a lot of them are excused, but they're either confused about what to do, or they're not taking the initiative to do it. And so if we can talk to our campuses about that, I think that's something I've experienced myself.
Do approved ones still, I mean, the kid's not in, so it doesn't affect your ADA. If kid's not sick, even if it's excused from an attendance from an academic standpoint,
Right.
it's still not a kid in a seat, and it affects
So
the
you
ADA.
still don't get, even if they're sick?
That's right.
If it's
It
a
helps
student
you
absence,
float,
they're not
float,
set with
but it
their.
does not affect your.
So, one of the things they talked about during the census gathering information was, is that we have we do have a large transient population in West Texas. And, I know this information is hard to get a hold of in a sense, but I feel like that we have such a large population that's going and coming constantly that, we have, it might not be identified that way, but there's people that work here for 6 weeks, leave, they might leave that a 4-day weekend or something, and then maybe bring their children back, or, cause they don't wanna have them, they don't wanna have them back wherever they live at, and they moved here for, my dad's doing the transit job, you know what I mean, that, and the old fields pick back up, so I'm seeing people coming in now, and, so potentially there's a part of the population that's doing that type of business in a sense, which causes irregularity in our system, because they're not steady homeowners, or they don't have, property here or otherwise, I mean, that combination is big and squirrely in the sense of it's being, because, they could be working in Monahan, but they have their children here, and maybe they get a long-term situation going, and maybe they move to Pecos for 6 months.
they need to check the kid
And
out
then
school.
they move them back, you know what I mean? So it's a little bit, I wouldn't call it a migrant situation, like, you know, where migrants used to move from one side of the country. But it's more of a, it's a quicker response type deal, you know, maybe shorter spurts, but
Mr. Bishop, to address your question to, I think, our system automatically marks a student here. So if the attendance is wrong, it would probably increase our ADA. You know, if they didn't go in there and do their attendance, it's gonna show 100% in their class. So they're actually having to go in and mark them absent in order to, for that calculation. So, you know, that was one of the questions I asked also, you know, are we not doing that? And then found out that actually the attendance is considered at 100% and they have to go in there and check that that student was not there, or not in that class at that point in time. So, you know, that's why I say that we do have a lot of students out. Now, this is built off an average, you know, but on average, if our enrollment or our membership count that came out, you know, it comes out on Friday, is at 26,441, I believe is what it was this last Friday. There's a big difference in what our attendance is and what our membership is. So, those are some of the things that, like, you know, across the nation we're addressing. And so, we're trying to address that here with, some of the new positions that are be social workers to try to work with students and parents to try to get those students back. So,
I think the most important thing, I know we need to move on, but it's not just about money.
no,
It's about the stress we're putting on our teachers
Yeah.
because our kids are missing and not keeping up with
Yeah.
education.
Exactly.
And so we've got to do better because of that.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the money guy talking to you that's saying that those students are missing out on their academic career. That maybe that light bulb moment that they needed to make sure that they got what they needed for that, to move on to that grade level or to get up to grade level. That's every time they're gone. They just said, "Oh,
That's why we a lot of our kids are behind, because we're not in the classroom.
So this number here, 2378, is actually built off just his 6 weeks, not the average. So that's why this number had changed from the last one. But anyway, here's our property values again, going from 34 billion to 43 billion, and a 26.99% increase. This is the difference between budget workshop number 1 and budget workshop number 2. The biggest difference is our ad valorem taxes, when our values increase 26 or 27%, that increases our amount of tax revenue that we'll be receiving. So it's about a $31 million change in ad valorem taxes.
Most of that will get them back in Robin too.
Exactly. The state revenue will adjust also. And then, we had some adjustments in TRS on the half, which is kind of, it's just more or less just a net, journal entry. The campus budgets, changed just a little bit as we work through them. And yes, the elephant in the room is our recapture is going for an estimated 148 million to 172 million.
1 month.
Well, that's
Just
because,
Well, but,
yeah,
but I'm saying, like,
Yeah.
that's a lot.
So,
Right.
Scott, so even though that is
38%.
$24 million jump, our state revenue, the grant money to come back, no harmless, we don't get any of that money back? No?
no, no.
Because it went down almost 7 million, so.
Right. And most of that's gonna be in the foreign transition grant funds. So as the values went up and we received more tax money, it's gonna adjust between recapture and our revenue. That's where it's gonna adjust. Yeah, that way we net out at the same amount of, you know, we're gonna be netting out right around $267 million. That's where we're at. And
And
so,
at the same time, going forward from now on, we're gonna be at that compressed tax rate.
We will be at that compressed tax rate, yes.
And so when oil is not $100 a barrel,
We will still be, and as home prices also maybe start to
Well, as
level
they
off.
start ticking
Oh.
up interest rates.
well, I guess that's better.
So this is, so our total budget is, from the first workshop was at $431 million. It's moved to $455 million.
Excuse me.
But at 455, our budget, and the recapture at 172, it's almost 40, it was a third of our budget, now we're creeping into, it's almost 40% of the budget now.
We can't keep doing this.
So until there's something done legislatively on this, you know, that's, that is, where we're at. So, unfortunately, and that's, and I think that's something our community really needs to understand, is how much money we are sending back to the state for them to put in their general fund. And so that, you know, we're still about fourth on the list as far as sending back recapture.
Yeah, because all the ones ahead of us have got the same problem.
They
The
do.
growth areas,
Yes,
valuations go up.
right, right.
Now, that, remind me, and then you don't have the answer, and we need to move on, that's fine, but the recapture 49 from its history, from, I can't remember when, that time we sat there and talked about it for about an hour, how it developed in the 60s or 50s, and there's different choices in there, but if you select one, you have to stay. But anyway, with all that said, the recapture by loss, it will not go away, from what I understand. Now, it can be adjusted, but it'll never go away, right?
As long as the legislators don't make a change,
Huh?
as long as the legislators don't make a change, then yes, it will.
There can be a legislative.
There can be a
change on
legislative
how
change
schools are funded.
in how school finance is funded. But right now,
And we're still at the point where it was ruled by the Supreme Court of Texas that it's broken, and we're waiting to get to the next system, or is that not
That
true?
was the Robin.
that was back quite a few years ago, that lawsuit was there.
It wasn't,
We didn't
Most
get-
recent
We didn't get the ruling we want.
It was bad. It wasn't unconstitutional.
So you're correct, Robert, it would be a major change, but that's not to say that it can't change.
There is actually some talk for the first time that there needs to be, the property owners of Texas are bearing too large a burden of the tax burden to finance, state services and local services. And so there is some discussion for the first time, I think, that says, well, maybe we ought to look at other sources of revenues like sales tax or whatever.
That's the only one.
And so that's why we were mumbling never, it'll never change. I don't know,
There could be
would say
change.
never, and there's actually, for the first time, discussion that maybe down the road, there is some changes in the works.
well, I bring that up because, once again, just for discussion purposes, because our public, that's gotta go work and busy with all that stuff, that it's hard for them to understand sometimes about this recapture business and how we're giving all this money back to the state.
Yeah.
And that we end up getting none of it in a sense for an increase because of cost of living here and so forth. So,
Right. Any other questions on this? So y'all seen this slide before. This is something I talked about last year, as we approach the financial cliff in 24, 25. Some of the things that I want to try to point out to you, we talk about any types of change, it really doesn't make a difference as far as our total revenue goes. And if you look at the net state and local revenue, and this is what pops out at me. In 1819, our net was $213 million. And if you scroll right over here, 24, 25, and I added the one additional penny right here, which is $4 million. It's 217. So the years from 2018-19 through formula transition grant, we're back to the same
And we're
amount
inflated,
that we were.
There's the fiscal cliff.
and we're inflated now.
Yes, and now everything costs a lot more than what it will be. And so, like I said, here's formula transition grant. It nets out just a little bit here and there, but it always stays somewhere around 265 or 260 to 270 million. Our net revenue, minus our recapture. So this is, to me, the telling story of where we were and where we're headed. And at this point, I mean, I maybe run out of town this afternoon, but a voter-approved tax rate election is gonna have to happen right here in order to increase the tax rate above the deal. And I would only suggest right now, and this is just me talking, to stay within 8 cents. That way recapture doesn't come into the picture. Because we could raise the tax rate, right now we're full, we can go 1 penny on any time, but now raise it 3 cents, which would take the voters to approve that. But none of that would go to recapture, it would stay here. And right now at our values at 43 billion, that would be about 4.3 million per penny. Does it fix this? No, but it gets us a lot closer to fixing this financial cliff that we'll be doing. This right here is showing a negative in 23-24, mainly due to attendance being so low. If we get the attendance rate back up, this goes back to flush right now. I mean, these are just estimates right now as we move into next year's budget year and we start working on next year's budget. This will change. And these will too, but it's still gonna be about $56 million that we're gonna be losing in 24-25. School year 2024-25. So I just wanna, when we went back here and looked at this, it was just, I don't even wanna say, it's crazy how in 5 full years, we go back to the same funding system as before. Overall, is what we go back to essentially. And of course, this is the budget highlights. I'll get off the depressing things. Some of the
Are there
things we're
highlights?
doing, yes. Going up to 58.5 for our teachers, beginning salary is a great thing. Increasing our minimum support staff to $13.50 from $13 an hour, and then a 2% midpoint. You see what that costs the district. Moving into changing and working with LLI, the new position in staffing matrix, being able to do some of the things that they wanted to do. We didn't get to all of it, but and hopefully if our student starts coming back and we start getting our attendance rate up, then maybe some of those positions can be added at that point in time. We are doing away with the perfect attendance stipend. That's the only way we can pay for the increases, is to get rid of the perfect attendance stipend. But we're adding back a guaranteed 1,000 in actual salary and another salary in the staff retention. So those things are, instead of having a chance of making $3,000 on a perfect attendance stipend, now you have a guaranteed 2, and one of it is going towards increasing your TRS retirement. So, and then of course, Mr. Bailey talked about the increase, and we'll add that into our budget.
But the 1.6 you said earlier was just the estimate anyway. We're waiting to hear that. Okay.
Yeah, so.
Appreciate your
Anyways,
work.
Yeah.
So it's been a great working atmosphere between our groups and Ms. Martin over here, I made her present, so she would have to get that last deal before she
Quit.
takes off. Yes.
We're
And
proud of
they're
her.
proud of
Yes,
her.
Carla, thank you.
Yes, we are.
Very much.
That is. By the way, that job is already posted, so, if you know somebody, yeah. That'd be awesome. Anyway, y'all have any other questions?
And she was just waiting for Woodrow to change the compensation menu.
Yes.
There you go.
Any other questions, any other discussion? Thank you,
you.
Mr. Dodds. Thank
Yes,
you,
thank you,
Carla.
guys.
Thank you, Mr.
Thanks for the
Brady.
hard work.
Thank you, Dr. Ramsey. The time is now 12:55, and we will adjourn the meeting.